All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. It's a good thing we're getting some rain for a change, isn't it? Before we get into the content, I do want to cover a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you're new to GoToMeeting, then your screen should be coming up here shortly. And my computer is not responding. Hold on. There we go. You should have something like this on your screen, and you can control your own experience using the control panel. In this view, it's on the right-hand side. Now, if you take a look at that control panel, there are a few controls. Up at the top, there's an orange arrow, and you can use that to expand or collapse the whole control panel there. The questions are going to be handled through that question box in the control panel. I've got everybody's mic muted so that there are fewer distractions. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in. We do have a few questions that were forwarded ahead of time, but feel free to pop your question in there and I should see it as you hit the enter button. And then in the top section there is where you can control the audio for your own computer. You're going to remain muted, but you can monkey with your sound if you need to. And with that, we'll get into the discussion of gas services to Ostrander and the Meadows of Mill Creek. We're going to start off with the question of why. Why are we having this meeting? Why are we here? First, though, I want to make sure that everybody really understands the foundation of who Consolidated is. Because Consolidated is not me or the employees or even the trustees that you've elected. You are Consolidated. The only purpose that I and the other employees here serve is to act as your agents. Back in the 1930s, neighbors joined hands and said, we need to invest our money in bringing a quality of life service to this area that we can't get from the existing providers. So they hired some people to be their agents to make sure that got done. And that's who we are. We don't have any money. All we do is we use your money to invest in the facilities it takes to get these quality of life services out to where you are. Now, tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about the whens and the whys of this project and the communications and, frankly, some of the confusion that has arisen through the communications. We're going to discuss where we are now and what the future looks like, and then we're going to answer questions, the ones that have already been sent, and then any that pop up as we go along. Again, thank you for taking time out of your schedules, and I hope you find this presentation helpful. It will be recorded and it will be available on our website for viewing later if there's anyone you know who wants to take a look at it but can't be here right now tonight. We're going to start first with a timeline of the project. What happened when and why? It all started back in 2012. That's when Ostrander approached us and said, hey, is there anything Consolidated can do to extend natural gas service to the village and the surrounding area? At that point, the transmission tap through Columbia Gas Transmission was going to cost too much, and it was going to be too far of an extension for the project really to be feasible. The cost involved in getting the gas service to the Ostrander area at that time, we would never be able to recoup our investment, particularly given the few people that live in that area and would take the service. We didn't stop, though. It had always been on our radar. And then last year, we found a closer transmission tap that would cost less for us to tap into and be about half the distance for the extension. And we said, with those parameters, we think we can make a go of this. Then in the spring and summer of last year is when we started communicating with the residents. We sent out the survey to the residents because the pipe propane system in the Meadows of Mill Creek, we can't convert part of it. It has to be an all or nothing thing. And since we're a cooperative, since we are driven by our members, we can't force any member to do something he or she doesn't want to do. Therefore, we sent the survey out, got only about half the responses back, but we really needed almost unanimous agreement with the project before we could move forward. As we were contemplating what the next step was going to need to be as far as getting that almost full response, we realized time was running short for the heating season and for the propane customers to be able to lock in their prices on prepay. So we said at that point, we're going to wait on further communications until next spring when the heating season is over, and then we'll pick this up again. Then, during the summer and early part of the fall, we ran into another snafu. The financing sources that we have presented us with a challenge that we had to figure out how to overcome. That challenge was created by the fact that we had undertaken the task of getting broadband, particularly fiber optic broadband, out to all of our members in a very, very short period of time. It's a huge amount of money and really put a stress on our financing sources. Again, we don't have money of our own. So when we embark on a project, we have to use those financing resources, get the facilities built, and then recover the costs of that financing through our rates. But when the government shutdown hit late last year, getting those financing sources to pay our contractors and our material providers came into question. And that's when we communicated, hey, the government shut down, it's affecting our fiber, it's affecting our ability to do this gas, we're going to have to wait until that's done. Well, the government shutdown went away, the government went back to work, but that pause gave us time to recognize that the fiber construction that we had already undertaken, of which most of you here are benefactors of what we were able to do, but the cost came back about 30% higher than what we had counted on for the business plan for getting fiber out to all of our members. What that did is it took a project that we figured we could recoup our costs in 7 to 10 years and push that out to 17 to 20 years. And that we decided was just too much of a risk for us to reasonably undertake. We're still trying to solve that problem because it affects every member. Every member that we serve is going to be able to benefit from that project. And so that's a huge priority for us. And frankly, at this point, our concern is tying up our financing resources on a small project like the Meadows that might jeopardize our ability to bring this better service, the more impactful service to our entire membership. So that's where we are right now in 2019. So we can't reasonably tie up our financing resources to extend the gas lines to Ostrander in the Meadows until we get the bigger problem solved of how are we going to get broadband to our members. The project isn't going away. It's just held indefinitely until we figure out how we can solve this pretty monumental puzzle piece about our financing. Now, the communication through that process, I know there was a lot of confusion. There were a lot of different messages, but that's because the situation had been changing so rapidly. And frankly, our attention was much more focused on the bigger issue of the broadband than it was necessarily on the gas extension to Ostrander in the Meadows. Not because we don't want to do it, but because with limited resources, we have to make sure we're prioritizing what we do to affect as many members as we can with those resources. Now, that's the situation that created some of the confusion with the project and the messages that were formally and informally getting conflated, so that I'm sure you heard a lot of different versions about a lot of different things. Add to that the fact that we were also extending fiber to the area. Some of those messages that got back to us had been confused with what's going on with gas, and that just exacerbated the problem. So now what I want to do is I want to talk about what is the project, and if and when we do this, who's going to be responsible for what. So what are the responsibilities? This project involves, on our side, tapping into the transmission system, extending the gas lines down the roads, scheduling and coordinating installing service drops. We'll perform leak tests and relight appliances, and then we'll do a rough restoral of any yards that have to be disturbed if we have to bury new lines. Now in the meadows, there's likely to be very, very little that has to be done since the pipe system already exists in that development. On the resident side, each resident is going to have to be responsible for either converting or replacing whatever gas appliances they would like to attach to the natural gas system. Now, originally we had, and in the survey, we had presented an option that we had found a third party who was going to provide a really good group price to do those conversions. And we presented that, but the cost was then and will likely always remain the responsibility of each individual homeowner. Then each person who signs up for the gas is going to have to pay some tap fee, and the amount, we can't tell you what that is until we actually proceed with the project and know what our costs are likely going to be, at least. And then each individual landowner is going to be responsible for any final yard restoration. When we put pipe in the ground, when you dig the ground up, it never goes back exactly the way you took it out. We'll do the rough restorations, but the final dressing of any disturbed soil will be the responsibility of the property owner. So that's the scope of the project and what the project will most likely entail when we do have the ability to either get the financing or find some alternative. Now, what obstacles still remain to us bringing gas out to the meadows and to Ostrander? Two main obstacles. First, everyone in the meadows has to convert during the same non-heating season. We can't take part of that pipe system and running it on natural gas and another part and run it on propane. And then finally, Consolidated will continue to have to triage or prioritize our financing resources, our manpower resources, to make sure that we get the most benefit for the most members for the resources we have available. So what's next? Right now, we see two reasonable options. The first is we're going to have to wait some amount of time until the financing resources free up. That could be 1 year, that could be 10 years. It's just way too early to say for sure how long it's actually going to take. But we are not dropping this issue. We are absolutely going to reevaluate this project every year. The second option that we're looking into, and we don't have firm numbers to provide, but we're looking at a way, is there a possibility that perhaps the people in Ostrander, the people in the meadows, might be able to provide that financing themselves? It's a concept you're probably familiar with if you've ever hooked up a house to a water system, let's say Delco Water. If the residents of Ostrander and the meadows would pay a higher tap fee, that would allow us to lower our rates and get the project built without having to use those financing resources that right now we're prioritizing for broadband to our membership. The end result would be the same. Our normal way of extending lines is we would finance the project and then include the costs of that financing in the rates, in the monthly rates. In this scenario, if there's a group who would provide that upfront tap fee, the costs of that financing for us aren't there. We wouldn't have to include those in the rates, so the monthly rates would be lower. Now, right now, most potential participants in a program like that are the Meadows and Mill Creek. There are some other developments that we've heard about nearby that would help with that situation, but it's not a one-to-one correspondence. We estimate in the neighborhood about 200 people right now might participate in a program like this. If another 200 people through these other developments get into the mix, it's not going to cut the cost in half because it will cost us additional money to extend to those other locations as well, but it will knock that price down. The bad news is that right now, the way the numbers look, it would probably be about an 8 to 10 year period of time before that higher upfront tap fee would be made up for by the lower rates. And we just don't think there's going to be anywhere near 100% acceptance of a program like that. But those are really the only two reasonable paths that we can take in order to get gas to Ostrander. And I put number 3 in there because there might be something that we're not thinking of. We're absolutely open to listening to thoughts that other people have, but right now the two most likely scenarios are the financing gets freed up, or a group of residents in the area decides we can make this happen. There's a very, very remote possibility that there could be a partnership with a third party. I don't like that because the third party is not likely going to be not-for-profit, and the financing costs in that scenario would likely be higher than what our normal financing costs are. But that's a very, very remote possibility because then that third party also would have to be willing to take the risk on the financing of the project. That's about it for where we've been and where we are with getting gas to Ostrander. We've got some questions that were presented to us beforehand, and I've got some slides to cover those. We do have a couple of questions that have popped up on my screen here. So if you'll give me a brief second, I'll take a look at those questions and see how they fit with what we've already got prepared. Yeah, here's a very, very good question. It says, if Consolidated works for us, then who made the decision that fiber was more beneficial than gas? That's a great question, and it's a simple matter of numbers. Right now, there are potentially 200 people that could benefit from gas in the Ostrander and the Meadows area. We have 15,000 people who could benefit from the fiber. That's an overwhelming majority, and that's why our priority is there. Add to that the fact that the fiber and the availability of broadband goes far beyond the individual member benefits, but it also helps make sure that all of our communities thrive and prosper into the future. It affects the farming community, it affects the business community, it affects development. It's just a much, much broader scope of benefit than the gas is. The next question, why would the Meadows pay a tap fee when we already have a tap supplied by Consolidated? That's another good question. You have it. I'm using the word tap fee. It's not really the cost of the tap. You do have the tap, but what you don't have is the much bigger cost of getting the pipes extended from the gas transmission out to your home. That's the puzzle that's the part of the puzzle that's missing that at some point we're likely going to be able to finance. We just can't right now. So the message I'm trying to get across is, since we can't tie up our traditional financing, the next best option is that the people who would benefit from this gas extension might be able to pay some amount of money up front to get those facilities extended. Either way, the customers of the gas system are going to pay for those pipe facilities. It's just a question of when is that payment going to be made. Is it going to be more upfront and less over the subsequent months, or is it going to be less or none upfront and a higher month-to-month cost? And I wish I could give you the next is what's an estimate of the tap fees. I can't give you a reliable estimate right now. The numbers that we're looking at right now are probably on the order of magnitude of about 5 digits. And that's why we're saying it would be likely an 8 to 10 year payback before we could, before you could expect that tap fee to be made up for in the lower monthly rates. Why would the natural gas only apply to 200 homes in the meadows? What about the rest of the village? That's a great question too. It doesn't apply just to the meadows. Anyone else who would tap into the system would pay that too. It's just right now, the only likely people to want to tap in that scenario is the meadows. And can you touch on the spring issue that some have had? Natural gas, the person that asked a question about the regulators, I'll get back with you on a one-on-one on that. I'm not aware of that situation, and we'll have to find out and get back with you on that. But apparently there have been some, looks like there have been some regulators. I'm aware of one situation, but none others. But we'll get that information out to the person that asked the question, and probably generally as well. Now I'm going to take a minute and get into the questions that were sent to us ahead of time. And the first related to our billing detail. The question had been, why are there so many surcharges or separate charges on our, particularly on the electric bill? And I understand the perception, and it's an issue with just about any electric bill from any utility. But what we've done is, they're not surcharges, but we've sort of itemized the components that make up your total bill. Here's a sample of the detail of charges from an electric bill. And what I want you to look at is first, these three charges that we call distribution usage, generation and transmission, and then service fee. And very, very generally, you could say that the generation and transmission is the cost of the power that we buy to pass along to you. And then the costs in your bill that relate to our delivering that power to you are included in the distribution usage and the service fee. You can kind of think of it in terms of the generation and transmission is the cost of the pizza, and then the distribution and usage and service fees comprise the delivery charge that's added on if you have that pizza delivered to your house. Those are the three main components of your bill. We itemize those separately. They're not really surcharges. They're just an itemized portion of that bill. Now on this sample, there's also a line for a water heater credit. This person has a control on his or her water heater that helps us control our peak costs, helps us keep that generation and transmission costs down. There may be other items like area lights or things like that that show up on your particular bill, depending on your circumstances. Those are itemized as well on a per item basis. And then the last line is a consumption tax. Every electric utility in Ohio collects this consumption tax, and we just pass it along to the state. So those are the components of your electric bill. They're not really surcharges. You could consider perhaps an area light charge, or let's say you have a generator switch leased through us. That could be considered a surcharge, but we just wanted to make sure you understood the different components that make up your electric bill that you get every month. Now, on a typical propane bill, there aren't as many detailed items because it's a much more straightforward delivery. We buy the gas, and you pay for that in your gas usage fee, along with the delivery. And then the service fee is simply the cost of having the account and having customer service representatives on the phone to take your calls, having the service techs there to repair the lines if they get dug into, those sorts of things. And then sales tax, comparable to the kilowatt hour tax on the electric bill, but that's what you're more used to with going to the store and buying something and having to pay the sales tax. So much, much more straightforward billing for propane than for electric. Now the next question that was sent to us is, what are we doing to make our electric rates more competitive and and be more efficient in what we do to help keep costs down. And the question that I think we need to answer first is, how do we define competitive? Now, most of the people in this presentation right now, watching right now, are from the Meadows of Mill Creek. And here's an overhead view from Google Maps of the Meadows. Now, when we extend gas lines or electric lines to bring these services into the development, we have a certain number of people over whom we need to essentially spread the costs of those facilities. Now, I happen to know from early in my career, I started off working for the investor-owned utility in Columbus, laying out the electrical facilities for subdivisions much like the Meadows of Mill Creek. And I can tell you that the vast majority of subdivisions in particularly Columbus, but probably most neighboring utilities' service territories, are of the order of magnitude of about 60-foot frontage by 120 feet depth. Now, compared to where you are there in the Meadows, that's about a 3-to-1 increase in the number of people over whom the cost of the facilities can be shared. So, before we can compare, let's say, our rates to AEP's rates and say, are they fair, you'd have to consider, if you were paying the electric rates in Columbus, you'd very likely have one or maybe two other houses on your lot. So really, it's kind of remarkable that your rates aren't 2 or 3 times higher than what the rates are in Columbus. And if we back up and look at the entire system, we serve about 8 electric customers for every mile of electric line that we have to build and maintain to bring that service to those members. Most investor-owned utilities, it's an order of magnitude of somewhere between 50 and 100 customers per mile. So at least a 10-to-1 ratio. And again, considering that, the fact that our rates are only a few percentage points different from an investor-owned utility like AEP, rather than 10 times as much, I think speaks volumes to the fact that we are not for profit, that we are out to just serve high quality, high reliability, safely, and at a reasonable cost. Another way to look at it, and I put this together, if you happen to be at the annual meeting, this should look pretty familiar to you. And I went back to 2012. I went back to 2012 because that's when our power supplier stopped adding environmental controls to our main power plant so that our wholesale power costs stopped increasing like they had prior to that. So since 2012, what have your electric rates done? Now, the numbers I'm showing for Consolidated are our total kilowatt hour sales for residences and how much revenue we've collected from our residences. You know, I can't get into each individual specifics because there are just too many. It's like saying the average person in America is 5'8" tall doesn't mean that everybody is 5'8" tall. So these numbers are going to be representative of all of our residential members as an aggregate. Your mileage, as they say, may vary. But since 2012, what these bars show is what your electric rates have been. Now these include the distribution, the service fee, and the generation and transmission costs. And what the bars represent, as you can see, in 2013, it was about just under 1% higher than it was in 2012. The following year is almost 2%. What's missing out of this, though, is in 2014, we began an accelerated vegetation management program for 2 reasons. One was the emerald ash borer that killed just about every ash tree on our system. Those are the light green portions at the top. And the dark green portions, we had to kind of catch up from prior years of not spending as much as we should have on our vegetation. So we embarked on a program and we're almost done with catching up with our vegetation management. You'll note that the 2019 numbers are shown about half of what they have been the prior 4 years. Next year, those cost components should go away. So that's how your electric rates have changed since 2012. Now, I went to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and found a similar comparison for investor-owned utilities across the country, and this is what generally their rates have done over that same period of time. And you'll see that even with those extra costs for vegetation management that are going to be going away, our rates have tracked pretty closely with the investor-owned utilities across the country. Again, consider how many more customers they can spread their costs over to keep those rates lower than what we can. Again, I think we're pretty remarkable. And then finally, here's what the Consumer Price Index has done over that exact same period of time. You consider the fact that all we do is pass our costs through. Again, we're the agents. Our costs do include labor for people to do the work. There aren't very many people who are going to volunteer to do this work every day because we all have to eat. But we don't collect anything extra. The extra money that we do collect, we give back to you through your capital credits. So the CPI numbers here, that black line, represents pretty much what our costs have done over that same period of time. And as you can see, even with the accelerated vegetation management, our costs have not grown as fast as inflation has gone. Again, I think it's a good testament to the excellent work that the people you have working here for you have done in making sure we are more efficient and making sure that what we are doing is giving you better value every day. And finally, consider that on average, you spend about $5 a day for all your electric needs. Think about everything that electricity does for you every day. And again, it's just a humongous value for you. And I think we're doing a pretty good job on that. Next question that had been provided to us had been one of public safety, well, safety in general. So I'm going to address it from the standpoint of public safety and also employee safety. The question was, what are we doing to make sure that on our gas system that we're being safe? There are several requirements that we have through the federal government, through industry practice, that sort of thing, and we do have to pay very close attention. We utilize the services of a third party, Paradigm Safety, to make sure that we're crossing all our T's, dotting all our I's. It's an annual program. It complies with the Public Utility Commission of Ohio. It involves direct mail piece that each gas customer gets every year, along with local print media ads, and we regularly solicit feedback from area first and emergency responders for our systems, make sure that they're aware of who we are, where we are, and what needs that we have. We also do a leak survey every year of all of our lines to make sure there aren't any leaks that are going to create problems. And we go the extra step of installing an excess flow valve on every service line. It's an automatic shutoff that detects when the gas is flowing too quickly because of, let's say, a dig in or some other break in the line. It will automatically shut that gas off and prevent further problems. We also post safety information on our website, in our regular newsletters, and on our Facebook and in other communications that we have. From the employee standpoint, our safety program we're pretty proud of. It's proactive, behavior-based, and learning-based, as opposed to a punitive system that, hey, if you break a rule, you're going to get in big trouble. We want to focus on making sure we can learn from what happens so that people aren't afraid to report issues that come up, and we can prevent those from happening in the future. In addition, all of our gas employees are what's called operator qualified. That's defined in the federal standards, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. We also send our employees to the Certified Employee Training Program through the National Propane Gas Association, and we also do additional OSHA training. It's one of the reasons that our prices aren't necessarily the cheapest in the region. It's because we do invest significantly in the safety and education of our employees so that you get the best service that you can possibly get. I'll continue on. A few more questions have popped up on the screen as I was talking. Let's see. Do I have the price performance chart for propane? I do not have that, but it's something we can certainly get and make available. That's a good, I think that'll be a good comparison. And here's a question. We live in the Meadows, have a community propane tank, and you've been told that no one wants natural gas, but cannot find a neighbor that doesn't want it. We do understand that just about everybody does want natural gas. The message I'm trying to get across when I talk about the relatively few number of people there is there just aren't very many people there, particularly compared with the cost that it takes to extend the pipelines to get there. The people who are there absolutely do want it. It's just there aren't very many people there, given the amount of investment it takes to build the lines out there. And here's a question: why does the Meadows pay a higher per gallon than another supplier, Schilling in this case? And again, I can't really tell you for sure what all goes on into a competitor's pricing. All I can tell you is that we spent probably the better part of 6 or 7 years trying to figure out how we could get our prices down to the level that Schilling and the Farmers Co-op provide for this area. The only way we could do that is if we basically didn't train our employees and if we didn't provide them benefits that are comparable to what the rest of the organization gets and degrade their quality of life. And that's something we figure we can provide better service. Again, we're about low cost, but we're about high value. And there's a balance point between the two. And we think we're in a pretty good place. We are significantly cheaper than all the national providers that we're aware of that serve the area. But we do have two competitors who, for whatever reason, can get their costs down lower. We have made lots and lots of efforts to get our price just as low as it can, and that's what you're getting. Let's see, and then the last question so far is, what is the cost to extend the gas lines? And that cost is in the order of magnitude right now about $1.5 million. So it's a very, very significant cost. Why was a letter distributed stating natural gas would be available June 2019? Well, I think that question, I went through with the timeline and shared, give me a second here, and shared the sequence of events. I can't tell you for sure when the letter went out. It was probably one of those late spring, early summer of 2018 messages when we had every expectation of getting the gas lines out there. Then we hit the stumbling block of not all the Meadows residents responded to the survey, and we hit that delay pattern. Let's see. Next is asking if we're aware that the homeowners are allowed to have a buried propane tank, and absolutely we are. We've been working. I have to say, Bob Thomas and Chris Griesemer have been very strong advocates for you all, and in our meetings with them, we are very, very aware that that's a possibility. The cost of that, though, is pretty significant as well. And that is an option for any few people who would not want to convert their appliances to natural gas. But honestly, the cost to convert appliances to natural gas is much, much less than the cost to bury a propane tank. Have federal government grants to convert been utilized or explored? I'm not personally aware of any federal government grants. We'll look into that. It's a question I just can't answer right now, but we'll find out. And again, we'll get those answers out to you. Where would we be tapping into that the cost? Heard that the line is, okay, so the question is, where is the transmission tap that we're looking at? It's about 4 miles away. The details I can't tell you off the top of my head. I do know that the original tap was an 8-mile extension. The tap we're looking at now is about a 4-mile extension. Another question on the status of the fiber project. Well, that's another really good question. That is as well on hold. What we've discovered through this process, as I said before, our costs increased 30%, primarily because of the tariffs and because of the tight labor market right now, pushing out our payback period well beyond what's reasonable. We're trying to figure out now what's the next best solution, and it's not easy. Again, it's an immense investment, comparatively few people to share that cost, and that's where much of our attention has been focused on getting that puzzle piece solved. Right now, we're still on hold, but we are still very, very intently trying to find a solution to get broadband service out to all of our members. The next question, can we please survey the meadows again? And when it comes time for us to consider extending the gas lines, we absolutely will be surveying the meadows again. And it won't be just one survey question and that's it. We did not stop the survey because we didn't get enough answers. That was not it at all. The only reasons for the delays were the heating season coming up and then the situation with prioritizing our finances. I'm sorry. Somebody pointed out, I said Bob Thomas instead of Bob Taylor. I know a Bob Thomas, and it was just a slip of my tongue. I apologize, Mayor Taylor, for that. Let's see. Yes, thank you. Reminded me another question. A question I forgot to answer that had been prepared ahead of time. Is it possible to get copies of the gas and electric financial statements? We are a private, member-owned company. We will make our financial statements available to any member, but because we are private and we are in some competitive industries, we do not send those out. We send out a summary information in our annual report, but any member who wants to review our financial statements, you're absolutely more than welcome to come to the office, set up a schedule, come to the office, and one of our staff will go over those financial statements with whoever is interested. One quirk with being an electric utility is we have to follow some accounting standards through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that make our financial statements not really comparable to most other businesses. So in that review, we will have our staff here to help whoever's looking at those statements understand what those nuances are. Let's see. How can we be sure our gas meter has a propane spring and not a natural gas spring? That's a question I'm going to turn and ask Roger. Is there a way to verify that?
We can absolutely just call and ask us, and we'll run out and check.
Yeah, and the answer there is, if you have a question, if you're concerned about that, give us a call. Our crews will come out and verify that you do have the correct spring in your regulator. Next question, will we cover the cost for homeowners to convert their appliances? And the answer there is no, I'm sorry, we won't do that. It's the rate benefit you would receive using natural gas versus propane will far more than cover the cost of converting or replacing your appliances. But the cost of your internal appliances, that's going to be the responsibility of the residents. And comment here asking us to please utilize another means other than a letter and to survey our resident, or to survey the residents. We will be using pretty much every means available when we do the survey. So got a question here about fiber, and I will get back with you on that fiber question individually. Will we charge if the spring in the regulator is correct? No, we will not. Somebody asking about the transmission being 4 miles away, and what about the people in between Ostrander and where that tap is? Yes, we're including those people in this as well. Again, there aren't very many. There are way fewer of those than there are people in the meadows. And would we sell the gas lines in meadows to another gas provider? That is complicated by the fact that in a large part of the subdivision, those lines were buried in the same trench with our electric lines, creating a situation that would make it very difficult for us to sell those lines to another party for safety reasons more than anything else. But the other issue to consider, if a third party does come and extend gas, we're very, very well aware of that risk and that capability. But I want you all to consider the longer term ramifications of a solution like that, because you're talking about selling your own company to somebody else, and your own not-for-profit company to somebody else. And you may get the service perhaps a year, 2, 5 years sooner, because we can't really say when we're going to get out there. But in the long term, my personal opinion is you're better off staying with the company that you own, who's not for profit, and who isn't going to put you in a situation where your rates are dependent on their desires for a return on investment. We're still getting questions. Please feel free to keep them coming. I might not be able to get to all of them. However, after this concludes, because I do want to wrap this up here at 8 o'clock. And if the questions persist after that time, we do want to get your questions answered. It just won't be during this webinar. In the meantime, let's see. Will you coordinate the conversions of appliances with a subcontractor and negotiate a group rate to do so? And the answer is we will make every effort to do that if we can. That's our priority, but we can't guarantee we're going to be able to find a third party through whom to do that coordination. That organization is there today and very likely would maintain that same sort of an arrangement, but it just all depends on the timing of when we get those lines extended, and is that party going to be around? Is another party going to be around? Too much to say for sure which way or another. Why are we not able to choose our supplier on the electric side, similar to AEP, Edison, or other utilities? And the perception is that your kilowatt hour rate is twice what the others are offering. Our information and our analyses, I want to get the numbers that you're looking at, because we're pretty sure our rates, total rate, is within probably about 5% from AEPs, and even closer with First Energy. The difficulty comes in the itemizing, particularly in an investor-owned utility. The competitive portion that they advertise, the cost to compare, that's generation only, which is a pretty small fraction of the total bill. And again, they itemize their bills differently from the way we itemize our bills, so it makes the comparison pretty difficult. Before you make the assumption that we're twice or any multiple of another utility's rates, I urge you to contact us with what those rates are. We'll go through your bill and show you that our costs are very, very close to neighboring providers. Let's see. Yes. Yes, this online town hall meeting is one of two. The next town hall meeting will be live in person, and that will be at the firehouse, and it is on June 20th. So we will be there. Look forward, if you want to attend that. It's going to be pretty much the same message. There might be different questions, obviously, with a different group of people. But absolutely, we will be repeating this process live and in person on June 20th. So thank you for the comment and for the compliment. You haven't lost power there in a long time. Thank you for that. That's another good comparison when you compare rates with our neighboring utilities. It probably wouldn't hurt to talk to some of those neighboring utilities to see how quickly their power comes on in a big storm. One of the things we're proud of is that typically we're on significantly before our neighbors are. Question here, what would be the ramifications to our electric bill if you all decide to bury your own propane tanks? There would be little or no effect on your electric bill for having your own propane tank. That's an expensive proposition. You might be better off taking that money and investing it in that number 2 option that we've been talking about of pooling your resources to get the gas extended, as opposed to a lot of you burying your own propane tanks. Let's see. Well, and thanks for the warning of the villagers with pitchforks, but I think we'll be okay. I can move pretty quick sometimes, particularly when I'm threatened with a pitchfork. All right, well, that's the end of the. Oh wait, one more question just popped up. Yeah. And again, to the person who's putting the details of what they're looking at, the generation and transmission costs of a neighboring provider. Again, that cost you need to add to their distribution cost to get your total rate. We break ours down in that. Again. It's much better and much easier to go through that one-on-one than it is talking in generalities here. Will we have pre-buy on propane again this year? Absolutely, you will. We have no intention of ever stopping that program. We also are pretty happy to be able to provide a budget billing option as well. And I think that pretty much covers the questions in so far. I'll stall for a minute or two in case somebody's furiously typing away on their screen as I talk. Again, as I wait, I'll reiterate, I can't thank you enough for investing your time with your cooperative to see what's going on for the betterment of your communities. And I appreciate the fact that you've given us this opportunity to get the message out directly to you, directly online, but again, we'll be face-to-face on the 20th. And no, I don't know the pre-buy cost right now, but you'll be able to call in as soon as that program kicks off and get what those prices are going to be. Question, what is the pre-buy program? It's if you participate in the pre-buy program, you commit to buying a certain number of gallons of propane, and because of that commitment, you get a discounted rate for the propane. How much does the pre-buy save, Roger? Typically, what do you think?
Last year, 30 cents.
Last year, the pre-buy program saved about 30 cents over the market rate during the heating season, 30 cents a gallon. All right, I'm going to skim through the list here and see if there are any that I missed. All right, and I'll ask if one of you out there knows that I did miss one of your questions, maybe you could help me out and retype it for me. But for right now, I think that's all about all the questions we have. Okay, I just found out right now that the pre-buy price is $1.84.9 per gallon. So hot off the presses, I guess. And still skimming the list. Again, thank you so much. I thank you for the opportunity to be here and serve you in this way. I get great enjoyment out of working at a company whose only purpose to exist is to make life better for our members and our communities. I appreciate all of you in your time and look forward to seeing some of you on the 20th. In the meantime, if you want to ever stop by, say hi, you know where our office is. A few more last minute comments. Does the amount you purchase have to be used within a certain period of time? And this is back to the pre-buy. At the end of the pre-buy program, if you did not use all of the gallons you signed up for, you still would have to pay for those gallons. So let's say if you committed to 100 gallons of propane, but only used 50, you would still be charged for the remaining 50. Isn't that how it works, Roger?
The credit would stay on your account for the following year to use the difference.
Okay. Yes, but that difference, that credit would remain on your account, and then you could use that the following year. So actually, it's better than I thought. It's just you're going to commit to those gallons in advance. Oh, the current structure of the consolidated board. Every 3 years, each member is up for election. The process is very open. The first is you have an opportunity to vote to nominate trustees, and then once the nominations are completed, we find up to three candidates who are willing and able to serve. We don't limit it, do we, Pam? Okay, so whatever candidates are willing and able to serve, they'll show up on the ballot and you vote. Got a thank you for utilizing this medium, and absolutely we are going to use this medium not just for Ostrander, not just for natural gas. It will be utilized much more frequently. At a minimum, the annual meeting, but then very likely several other opportunities. So yes, we're very happy with this capability. It saves a lot of us a lot of windshield time, certainly. And let's see, where are we? All right, it's 8 o'clock. I'm going to conclude the webinar at this point. Again, the recording will be made available on our website. probably within, well, probably sometime next week. And I hope you all have a wonderful, if wet, evening, and look forward to being here serving you. Thank you.